Hello, and welcome back to another week on the Self-Ruled podcast. I hope you're doing well today. I hope you've been having a great week so far and that everything is smooth on your end. Today, I want to talk about investing in your trust. Trust is a big thing. It's a big thing in relationships of any kind, the relationship that we have with ourselves, the relationships that we have intimately with family, with partners, the trust we have in our workplace, with our coworkers, with our team, with our boss, and even I would say outward even more out into our community. What is the trust that we have? And trust is really one of those things that is probably the ultimate form of currency when it comes to relationships, like I said. But I think the one that gets overlooked a lot is the relationship or the trust that we have with ourselves. I think we are often very quick to evaluate our trust with other people. Do I trust them? Do they trust me? And we put a lot of that emphasis on other people. But I would say that what's most important is whether or not we can fully trust ourselves. I came to this conclusion out of the realization that there were a lot of years in my life where I didn't have that deep self-trust. And so when you don't have deep self-trust, you're overly reliant on things from other people. You become more reliant on encouragement from other people, validation from other people, praise from other people, permission from other people, because you're trying to outsource something that you can't get from yourself. You're not able to feel that sense of trust and confidence within. And so you're looking outside of yourself, hoping that someone will give you something that you lack. But self-trust is absolutely critical for the development of that inner confidence. This is the Self-Ruled podcast, so we're really here all about figuring out how can I source these things from within, consolidate power within, centralize my power instead of outsourcing and giving my power away. And so being able to develop trust with yourself is really important for that. And being able to trust yourself is ultimately about how well or how willing you are to listen to yourself. I would argue that most people tune themselves out. And what I mean by that is they may know that they're not honoring their values, or they're not honoring their truth and speaking their truth. They're not living in a way that reflects their deepest values. They may know that, but oftentimes it's too uncomfortable to recognize that and change it. So they kind of brush past it or just kind of ignore it or avoid it. They're kind of in denial about it. But the longer we do this, the more it erodes the trust that we have with ourselves. I know from my own experience in my life, there have been times, mostly when I was younger, where I wasn't living in alignment with my values. And I knew it. I was aware of it. But at the time, I was trading my values for fitting in. I was trading my values for just the easier path, the path of least resistance. But it always comes with a cost. And the cost is that loss of trust and confidence that we have with ourselves. So it is, in my opinion, really important to be able to cultivate that self-trust, because once you're able to do that, you become less reliant on that validation from other people, like I said, and it becomes less about whether or not other people trust you, whether or not you can trust them, because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter if they trust you or whether or not you can trust others, because you've developed enough of that trust within yourself that you know that even if you get put in a position where maybe someone has wronged you or you can't trust them, that you trust yourself enough to do what's necessary. You trust yourself enough to honor your boundaries and to make the changes that you need to make. So I really like to think about trust like a bank account, and I'm sure you've heard this other places as well. I've used this analogy when I've worked with teams as far as putting trust into the bank account, removing trust. So how our daily actions can either be deposits into the trust account or withdrawals. I've heard this analogy used, I think, in couples counseling. Maybe marital counselors will use this, but it's just such a great analogy because we always want to have something in the bank. I think it's so relatable. If you log onto your account and you don't see any money in the account, or maybe you're in a negative, that's pretty stressful. And the same can be said for our closest relationships. And like I said, I would argue that trust or that relationship with ourselves, that's the most important, because that is the foundation for all of the other relationships that we're going to have. And so the account that you have with yourself is really important, whether or not you're putting those deposits into your trust with yourself or when you're making big withdrawals. I think the things that can help us put deposits into that trust account with ourselves are things like listening to ourselves, honoring our values, holding boundaries, speaking up even when it's uncomfortable, really holding the belief that our feelings matter, that how we think and feel about things is important instead of just glossing over them. I think a lot of times we really kind of gaslight ourselves. We know we feel something, we know we're uncomfortable with something, but we find a way to kind of tune it out, to tune that truth out. And whenever we do that, we're actually taking withdrawals out of that trust account, because we're basically telling ourselves, hey, we know this isn't right, or we know this doesn't feel good, or we know this isn't serving us, but we're going to do it anyways. And so the more you do that, the more you're withdrawing from that trust account. But you can start putting trust back into the account, making deposits by switching that narrative. So today I just really want to dig a little bit deeper into really just 3 layers to this, and hopefully something here will speak to you. So building trust with yourself, which is key for overcoming fear and self-doubt and living more courageously, starts with really honoring your values by living them out loud. So like I was saying, there was a time in my life where I knew I wasn't living in alignment with my values. Maybe you can relate. And it can be in big ways that are pretty awful, or it can be in just the small, subtle ways that we ignore or live out of alignment with our values. So it's not just about holding the values, it's about your willingness to live those out loud. So the first layer I want to talk about is valuing your truth. And this kind of ties into what I've already been saying, but a lot of times we don't value our truth. We may not even know what our truth is, or we may know, but we aren't willing to value that truth. Like I said, we gaslight ourselves. We know the truth of a situation. We know the truth of a person. We know what our truth about something is, but we aren't willing to value it. So that is really the first step. If you want to put that deposit into your trust account, you have to be able to value what the truth is for you. Not necessarily what the truth is for other people, but what is the truth for you? That could be something like the truth that you know your relationship isn't working, or the truth that you know you need to say something at work because something wrong is happening, and you know in your conscience, you know that there's something wrong with that situation. So truths can be everywhere. It could be the truth that, hey, I know I'm not living in a way that is healthy for me, or I know I have let my mental health get out of control here. And so the truth could be literally anything, but whatever truth about yourself that you're hiding from or ignoring, you have to be willing to look at that and actually value your truth. I think the second layer of this is about speaking your truth. And so it's really about having alignment. You may know your truth, you may even value it internally, but how willing are you to speak your truth to other people, to be in that integrity that what you say is in alignment with what you're thinking and feeling? And I forget where I first heard this, but we hear a lot about integrity, but I heard someone talk about emotional integrity. And I think this is really powerful because a lot of times we think about integrity more so outside of ourselves, like out in the world, at work and relationships. Are we doing the right thing? But emotional integrity, I think, brings it a lot closer to home with how closely we're honoring what we're thinking and feeling, what our truth is, and then our willingness to speak it out loud. I had a couple of difficult conversations in the last week or so, and I reflected this to someone close to me, and I was just explaining to someone how, wow, it's crazy how over the last 5 years or so, I see a big change in myself as far as how I handle conflict or how I have challenging conversations with people. And it's really because I got a lot better at not only honoring my truth, but in order to honor your truth, you have to be willing to speak your truth, even when it's very uncomfortable. And definitely, there were years in my life where if it got uncomfortable, I would just not even want to say it. I would not want to tell people things that would hurt their feelings. I wouldn't want to have the difficult conversations. I wouldn't want to challenge people, especially when it came to really sensitive topics or people that I was really close to. And that is something that changed in me because I changed. I changed because I started having that more of that emotional integrity of, it sends an alarm bell through my system if I'm thinking and feeling something repeatedly and I'm not voicing it. But in the past, I used to ignore those things and not own them, not claim them. So I know I'm not alone because a lot of people struggle with speaking their truth, especially when they know that it could mean a shift in the relationship. It could mean consequences with someone because you are taking that stand. But when you do that, when you know something needs to be said, when you've been thinking and feeling something, but you've been holding it back, or you know something, but you've been holding it back, you are taking trust out of your account because you're sitting on something that matters to you and you're not vocalizing it. And you're really sending a signal to yourself almost like, hey, be quiet. We don't need to bring this up. You're silencing yourself. You're actually oppressing yourself. But once you start to honor the things that you're thinking and feeling, honor your values, care enough about being in alignment with your values that you're willing to risk relationships, you're willing to take a stand, then you begin to put those deposits back into your trust account because you're showing yourself through repeated efforts, through multiple situations, that you're no longer the type of person that holds things back when they need to be said. You're no longer the type of person that is going to silence yourself to keep the peace or to maintain a relationship. That will add trust into your account like you wouldn't believe. The more you show yourself that you're going to do that repeatedly, you start to build that courage and that confidence. And I guess the last layer I want to talk about, and these are all very connected, these are all very fluid, but the last layer I want to talk about is living your truth. So we already talked about you have to value your truth, you have to speak your truth, but then you also have to take it even further and live your truth. So it's the embodiment of those values. It's not just, okay, I know what they are, I'm willing to speak up about them, but how are your daily actions, the way that you live your life, how do those reflect those deeper truths that you hold? And I know that sometimes this isn't easy, especially if you're in an environment where your values are clashing with maybe the dominant majority, or maybe let's say there's a values clash in your relationships or your friendships. I mean, just look at the world right now. I don't even want to bring up politics on this podcast. I've never brought up politics on this podcast, but that's just another example of how it can be uncomfortable to speak our truth, to share our truth, to stay to our values. But only you know what living your truth looks like for you. I think it's absolutely different for everybody. But for me, living my truth is living in alignment with the values that I have, living in alignment with the vision that I've created for my life, living my life in a way where I feel like I don't have to feel guilt, or I guess just wanting to live my life in a way where I can feel proud of how I've carried myself, where I can feel proud of how I've treated other people. And of course, I have never been perfect. None of us are perfect, but I think it's more about the actions. I think there's a lot of people out there that it's more of like, it's very performative when it comes to doing the right thing. But I think this is flashback to my Marine Corps days, but when I was in the Marine Corps, integrity was defined as doing the right thing even when no one's watching. So I think living your truth is also about how you're living when nobody's watching you, how you're living when no one else can see it. Because I think it's really easy to kind of have this image that we maintain in public of, okay, this is who I am, this is what's important to me. But how are you living when no one can see? When you're in the privacy of your own home, when you're places where you don't know anybody? I think that's where it probably matters even most, because if we have those inconsistencies there, that is going to take trust out of the account, because our system is going to pick up on the discrepancy. It's like, well, you say you value this and you're willing to stand up for it when it's easy or when you're in the public eye, but you don't do that when you're on your own. And this could be about anything. I mean, this could be, I'll use fitness for an example, because right now I am just so focused on consistency in my life. I think consistency has been something that in the past I struggled with, because I was always kind of one of those people that would go for the big swings. Oh, I could go and get like a crazy workout in, and I would go for the big swings, but it was harder for me to maintain the small swings, those daily, consistent, repeated actions that stack up over time. But that is something that I've been learning, I guess, as I get older, and it's something I've been learning to practice. So I would say like this year, last year, and then especially this year, probably that's my word for the year. If any of you have a word for the year, but if anything, that's probably my word for 2025 is consistency, because I've really been learning the power of consistency, doing those little things repeatedly, and how powerful that is. When you actually start tracking things, you realize that doing a little bit every day and being consistent gets you a lot further than those big swings once in a while. And so I think about even things like that, living, and this could even be a truth that you've never expressed to anyone else. Maybe your truth is, I'm going to take better care of my health this year. But then what are you doing when you're with yourself that's pushing you in direction of that goal? So it doesn't matter what it is. So it can be even in these small private ways. But when you value what's important to you, speak what's important to you, but then it's also doing and living what's important to you. And that's where there's got to be that alignment between values, words, and actions. And very, very important when it comes to ourselves and building that trust. This could be in fitness. This could be, I told myself I was going to do X, but I haven't been doing it. But the more you can stack up those wins of, I felt this way, I spoke what I felt, and then I lived in alignment with what's important to me or what I felt, then you're beginning to build that equity with yourself, that trust, that you're building it up. So then when you do have a bad day, maybe let's say you do have a bad day and you completely act outside of your own character, outside of your values, you'll be able to recover because you have all of this other evidence of all the ways you've shown up for yourself, all the ways you have honored who you are, your values, what's important to you. So it really is like an account. And we are all works in progress here. I am a work in progress, especially when it comes to this. I think there are areas of my life where this is a lot easier than others, but building self-trust is almost laying the foundation for everything you're going to do in life. And it's laying the foundation for how other people trust and how you trust other people. Because I really hold this belief that kind of how we are with ourselves is how we are with other people. So a lot of times if we are a certain way with other people, it's a reflection of how we are with ourselves. So I guess I'll leave you with a question and then I'll sign off here. But maybe a couple of questions. So when you think about your trust account, what is something you are doing that is depleting that account of trust with yourself? Maybe it's something you're doing that you just know deep down isn't in alignment with your values or isn't really helping you or serving you right now. I mean, we're walking contradictions, so sometimes we are doing things or living in ways that don't align. So what is something that you're doing that is taking withdrawals, making withdrawals on your account of trust? And then what do you think is something you could do right now to put some deposits of trust back into your account? All right. Well, that is what I have. That's what I have for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time.